Welcome to the Weather Farm. We're talking about the heavier snowfall that has come through the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley over our Sunday into our Monday morning. Many of us picked up more inches of snow than we were anticipating in our Friday video, and we're not done yet, as additional snowfall is forecast for areas south of Lake Michigan into Indiana and Ohio as we go through our Monday. And the real story arrives behind it with the surge of Arctic air that is set to dive into the south with the coldest temperatures that we've seen so far this season. So let's break down the timing, the totals, and the impacts so you know exactly what to expect in your area. As we look here at our national hazards map, we are watching winter weather advisories across parts of Illinois and Indiana. Closer to Lake Michigan, those are winter storm watches and warnings that have been issued. I would expect some of those to be upgraded during the day on our Monday. We also have them across the UP of Michigan, as well as the lakes of northeast Ohio and northwestern Pennsylvania. Even some snowfall advisories up through parts of the far northeast into Maine and New York. Across the south, though, we have those deep purples. Those are your freeze warnings for your Monday night, where we expect temperatures to go into the upper 20s by the time we get to Tuesday morning. Freeze watches are in effect for most of Alabama into Georgia and the western parts of the Carolina for Tuesday night, even making their way down near New Orleans. Not quite there yet. We do have a couple areas of red flag warnings for high winds on our Monday. So let's look at our jet stream, and we're watching this deep trough that is going to continue to dig and push that colder air all the way down into the south as it begins to pivot off towards the east. By the time we get to Tuesday, we're going to watch another little ripple right across the jet stream Tuesday and Wednesday. That could bring some more snow to the Midwest, but then we're going to watch a warming trend take hold over the middle of the week, Thursday into Friday. We see the polar jet retreating well to the north as we watch the subtropical jet make its way north into the central plains. And out west, we see yet another trough beginning to form. By the time we get to Friday and Saturday, that's going to set the stage for some severe weather here across the central plains as we get a negatively tilted trough by our Sunday morning. And all that will move east by the time we end next weekend. So taking a little bit closer look, here's where we are on our Monday morning. We have snowfall across Indiana into Ohio. This snowfall could accumulate 1 to 3 inches in some isolated areas. We have rainfall across the northeast and associated with this low pressure. We can see from these height contour lines, the blue lines indicate those higher levels that are cold enough to support snow, but along the east coast we see a lot of those red lines. So it's still too warm at those higher levels of the atmosphere to support snowfall, but back across areas that are downwind of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, we're seeing that snow fly across western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania. But across the central plains, we have a high pressure system in place that's keeping conditions very calm and very cold. And out west in the Pacific Northwest, we have a little bit of shower activity impacting Washington State as we begin our Monday morning. And by the time we get to Tuesday, we have another little shortwave that's going to move through Wisconsin, Illinois. Light snow is expected, generally ½ an inch to an inch at most. But we still have the lake effect snow machine continuing in the northeast, bringing those heavy snow bands into northwest Pennsylvania and western New York as that area of low pressure continues to move off to the north and east, now centered way up into parts of eastern Quebec. Out across the Rockies, it's high pressure continuing to dominate, and that's going to set the stage for a quieter weather pattern for most of the United States by the time we get to the middle of the week. So let's put everything into motion. We watch that snow continue to move through Illinois, down through Kentucky. You can see a light dusting by the time we get to Monday evening. Here comes that next shortwave trough, bringing a little bit of light snow on our Tuesday. And then we have a trough into the northeast, continue to bring a daily chance of rain and snow showers Wednesday into our Thursday. And we look out west where we see yet another atmospheric river beginning to make its way onshore by the time we get to the middle of the week. In terms of our expected snowfall on our Monday, we could see widespread 1 to 3 inches for the northern half of Indiana and Illinois, even making their way into far western Ohio. As we get closer to Lake Michigan, though, those totals increase. We could see 5 to 8 inches south and east of Lake Michigan, places like LaPorte over towards South Bend, and up towards Waukegan on the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We could see a few inches of snow. The key variable is going to be, where does that wind come out of? We see winds coming out of the northeast for most of Monday, so that's going to set up those snows to the north and west of Chicago. And as that wind pivots around, we're going to set up those snow bands here in northwest Indiana. And some of those could travel well down towards the Dayton and Cincinnati areas, providing you nearly an inch of snow. Across the UP, we're going to see snowfall amounts 6 to 12 inches across that area. Looking here at the northeast for our Monday, it's mainly rain across the eastern seaboard. Again, those upper level temperatures are just too warm to support the snowfall. But as that cold air begins to wrap in, by the time we get to Tuesday morning, some of that rain will change to snow. It will be light, but the heavier snows will be across parts of northern New Hampshire into Vermont and into Maine. So when we look at our liquid precipitation, we're going to see generally 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch heavier totals down as we make our way towards Philadelphia and Newark, Delaware. But as we get up into parts of Vermont and New Hampshire, we could see that snowfall beginning to pile up, and we could see snowfall amounts in excess of 6 to 12 inches, especially as we start getting into those pink colors and across parts of eastern Quebec. You could have areas that are 12 to 18 inches of snow as well, but across western New York and northwest Pennsylvania, in those favored snow bands, you could have isolated areas that do exceed 12 inches of snow by the time we get to our Wednesday morning. And here's the upper level pattern. We watch this trough that has been centered over the eastern third of the United States for most of this weekend. It begins to kick out. By the time we get to Tuesday, Wednesday, the pattern starts to turn a little more zonal. It still has that northwesterly flow, keeping it the eastern part of the United States and the Northeast a little cool through midweek. But by the time we get to Thursday, that ridge is building, and we're going to start to see a warming trend across the Dakotas, the northern Great Lakes, into the eastern part of the United States, as then we watch another trough begin to move onshore Thursday into Friday. And as those two air masses meet here in the Central Plains, by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, this is going to set the potential for some severe weather. So after we get through this system moving out of the northeast, we look at the system making its way onshore Thursday into Friday. Snow in those higher elevations, heavy amounts of rain along the west coast, making its way into the Rockies by the time we get to Saturday. And we see a low pressure beginning to eject out of Colorado into the Dakotas. That's going to intensify as we see a potential for a line of storms across Iowa, through Missouri, down through Arkansas, Saturday evening into Sunday. Rain moves through the Great Lakes where you saw snow this weekend. And then as we get to the beginning of next week, we're going to watch for the potential of a low pressure system developing off the east coast that could provide a lot of snow and rain for the Northeast to begin our next work week. In terms of our temperatures, highs here across Indiana, where you've seen that heavier snowfall, are going to be held down into the low 30s, upper 30s down towards Evansville and Paducah, especially across Iowa as well, where we've seen those heavier snows. 40s for your highs down through Mississippi and Alabama. We're seeing a warming trend on the lee side of the Rockies, 50s and 60s, making their way up into southern Canada. Still warm across the east coast as well. Again, that cold air has not filtered in yet, and so we're going to continue to experience rain until we get that switch over late Monday night into our Tuesday. And as we go into our Tuesday morning, our low temperatures are going to be widespread 20s and teens across most of the eastern two-thirds of the United States. Even some sub-freezing temperatures down here into the panhandle of Florida, most of Georgia. You're going to experience a hard freeze and the end of your growing season, and that cold air has now made its way to the east coast, where we're going to see those freeze conditions up and down the east coast to begin our Tuesday morning. Our high temperatures on our Tuesday will only recover into the upper 30s and low 40s here across the Great Lakes, low 40s and 50s across the east coast, 50s down across the southeast, 60s and 70s are going to be confined to the Central Plains. We will have another cold night as we begin our Wednesday, with areas east of the Mississippi still remaining below freezing for your nighttime lows, but we see those low temperatures across the Central Plains warming into the 30s and 40s for your Wednesday morning. And your Wednesday afternoon highs are beginning to rebound back to the 50s for the Ohio Valley and Tennessee valleys. But where you've had that heaviest snow here just south of the lakes, your temperatures are going to be held slightly cooler, but it's 60s and 70s all across the south through the Carolinas, making their way up towards Philadelphia. Out in the deserts, you're in the warm sector as well, 80s and 90s for your high temperatures. And as we go into our Thursday, it's a very mild pattern for most of the United States, though we are seeing cooler temperatures across the west coast where we have that next system beginning to make its way onshore. And as we go into our Friday, temperatures are 60s and 70s, a sign that there's going to be a temperature clash and an air mass clash across the Central Plains as we get into the weekend, as we are going to see temperatures that are running 15 to 20 degrees above your seasonal norms across the Central Plains. And as we get into our Sunday, the end of our weekend, we can clearly see where that cooler air is beginning to filter back down into the Central Plains, highs in the Dakotas, 30s and 40s, but out ahead of it through Indiana and Illinois, 60s and 70s, 70s along the south through the Carolinas, 80s being kept down across parts of southern Florida as well as southern Texas. But this pattern is going to bring yet another shot of cooler weather to the eastern half of the United States. And look out behind it. We have yet another system making its way into the Pacific Northwest by the time we start the next work week. And we're going to see this pattern where we're going to see these troughs moving from west to east in a 2 to 3 day pattern. And that's going to provide active weather for most of the United States. Well, we thank you for joining us here at the Weather Farm for your Monday forecast. We hope you're staying warm, staying safe. If you are experiencing that snowfall, let us know in the comments what kind of weather are you seeing in your area. We hope to see you again real soon, and have a great day.